From the 2017 Western Governors Association in Phoenix, the winter meetings, I'm Chris Berry, along with Governor Doug Burgum from the great state of North Dakota. Governor, welcome to Arizona, and look forward to hearing about sort of your thoughts on what's happening out west and your time as governor. I mean, it was just a little less than a year ago that you were inaugurated.
Yes, and great to be on the show with you, and looking forward to the conversation. Of course, I mean, Catherine and I are very honored to have an opportunity to serve North Dakota. It's an incredible state with incredible resources and incredible people. And people ask me, this is my first run at political office, first time I'd ever run for anything. And so, people ask, how do you like it? And I tell them it's the greatest job in the world, because every day you can get up and make a difference in people's lives.
And for those who don't know, Governor Burgum is a longtime entrepreneur. Very early on in the software business, sold his business to Microsoft for a little over $1 billion and became an active person there at Microsoft in the management there, and then also moved on to a couple of other companies. And then 15 years later decided that he wanted to become the governor. So it's great to see someone who is outside of the political realm, too, I think, coming in and using the business acumen that you've developed to run a state like North Dakota. So I want to start kind of with an easy question for you here. The Western Governors Association was really founded to tackle some of the unique topics facing the Western states. So to you, in the time that you've been there and you've lived in North Dakota, what do you think are some of the uniquely Western issues that affect the people of North Dakota and the people of the West?
Well, I think there's two things that jump right to the list for all these states, and one is energy. We think of energy production across whether that's all of the above, whether it's solar, whether it's wind, whether it's coal, whether it's gas, whether it's oil. The Western governors are really the energy powerhouse of this country, and all the innovation that's going on across energy, development, energy sources is very exciting, and I know that's one of the topics we'll be talking about at the conference. And the second one, of course, is agriculture, because these are all of these have got big ag states and play a huge role in nations' agriculture, and then that ties into trade, because of course when you're in energy and ag, a lot of those products are leaving the United States. These are export as well as import markets for us, and so the Western Governors is a terrific group of people. These are savvy business leaders. They have to be business leaders in the sense that even though they're elected leaders, they have to understand what's going on in the private sector in their states, because they're all contributing so much to the GDP of this country.
So let's take a look at those two issues, starting with energy. Obviously, that's something that the people of North Dakota have really embraced, the development of oil from shale and so forth. How's it going right now? We had the controversy over the pipeline, which seems to have died down a little bit. You've got OPEC. I think even today they said that they're going to be kind of clamping down a little bit more on oil production in hopes of driving price a little bit. How's the petroleum industry affecting the economy of North Dakota right now?
Well, of course, when you have dependence on a sector on commodity prices, when it's at $100 a barrel, things look pretty rosy. And then we had the crash, and things went pretty quickly down into $20 per barrel. That's a big shock for any economy to absorb, and the state went through quite a retraction. I think they just published the GDP numbers for the last 3 years, and North Dakota was 50th out of 50th in GDP growth, because we had minus 2.2 GDP growth the last couple of years, reflected both a downturn in agriculture prices and oil prices. So one of the things we have to do is work to diversify our economy so we're not dependent on that. But also now, the thing that you love about capitalism and you love about free markets is that all the people that have been developing that resource have brought their break-even point down, and they've brought it down by being smarter, faster, safer, better for the environment. I mean, it used to take 30 days to drill a well in the Bakken, and a well in the Bakken goes down 10,000 feet to a 30-foot width of shale, and it turns a corner, and it goes 2 miles and stays within that 30 feet, 2 miles down, 2 miles over. The technologist talking to a young petroleum engineer, 25 years old, in one of the the drilling shacks. I said, "How accurate on that?" He said, "If your house was 2 miles down and 2 miles over, I could drill the lockout on the front door." Yeah. And so you've got and then they not only have got the technology that's driving the accuracy. They've also, when this whole boom started, they were drilling one well on a 4-acre site. Now they're drilling 16 wells on a 4-acre site. So they're drilling a well in 12 to 14 days instead of 30 days. So their break-even cost has come down. So when when we got oil prices back to 50, instead of they being on the sideline, everybody started coming back to work, and that's great for our country to have energy independence. I like to even say energy dominance, because when we've got low energy, that's the $1 trillion tax break for Americans, is to have low energy prices, the way we consume energy in this country, and that's what this industry has been delivering for people.
And then we have agriculture too, which is another thing that this country uses a lot of food that is developed in rural states like North Dakota. Tell me a little bit about, you think of the broad expanse of the Great Plains and North Dakota and the states like that. Is it difficult to get people to stay on the farm these days and kind of stay in the towns and not the big cities necessarily, but the towns of North Dakota? How do you do that? How do you keep people around?
Well, on the ag side, of course, again, this is another area where, say technology is changing, every job, every company, every industry, and it's, not just changing the energy industry, it's changing farming and farming practices. And some of the most tech savvy people in our state are our farmers. And you take a look at the productivity. North Dakota leads the country in 12 different crops. It's the output that's coming from such a small segment of our population. The average farm size is up. The average number of farm workers is down. And we've got people that are running huge operations themselves, and maybe a couple of other well-paid, well-skilled, high-skilled workers that are there. And if you think about whether it's autonomous vehicles, I know there's a lot of work going on around the country on that. I tell people it's already arrived in agriculture, because you've got GPS driven precision manufacturing or precision automation, precision agriculture occurring, where we get tractors, combines, planters, grain carts. These things are virtually driving themselves. And when I was a kid, I grew up in a town of 350 people and grew up surrounded by agriculture. My grandfather started a grain elevator. I was in ag, always thought I was going to be in ag my whole life. When we were kids, we'd take one soil sample for every 160 acres, take it into the state lab, and you might get a analysis back 3 weeks later. Now you've got people that are doing continuous soil monitoring, as on 1 square meter as they're driving across, and then changing the application that's coming out of the back end of the tractor. Doing variable rate fertilizer and chemicals on the back based on their GPS mapping of these fields. And so again, it's come so far, and all of this, in both cases, energy and agriculture, in the end result, this is all great for the environment, because you're getting more done, getting more output with less inputs, and being careful about how we're treating the environment. So it's a win-win, but it's interesting to see how technology is really invading those two industries.
So this is your first meeting with this particular group, I assume, right?
You have a summer meeting up in Montana. So there was nine governors were at that one. I got a chance to meet some of them there, and there'll be 13 at this one.
Terrific. So what are some of the issues you think are going to be discussed? Kind of top of the agenda.
Well, I know there's don't want to tip a hand too far, but there's going to be 3 governors and a Canadian province make an announcement tomorrow about collaboration on some more innovation relative to the energy, what's going on in energy, and so I'm excited to be a part of that. And I know we're going to have some good discussions about the issues that are facing the governors in the West. And one of the things that's great about a bipartisan group like this, it doesn't matter what party you're from. Governors are elected to get stuff done and looking for practical solutions, and so I've really enjoyed the meetings, and there's a lot of commonality in terms of the problems that we're trying to solve in these in the states in the West, because we've got another thing we have in common is there's a lot of interaction with the federal government. There's a lot of federal land across all these areas. The other thing is which I found useful too, is related to the native population, because some of the challenges that we're facing, whether it's education, healthcare, the opioid crisis, those are all things that we're all facing. But all of us, if you put all of us in a room, you'd probably say, hey, the statistics are most challenging when you get on the tribal lands. And I think this is an area where the federal government has really let down the American Indian population, and I think it's at some point the states, there may need to be rethinking through the governance of how that whole program works, because the federal government's not getting it done, and these are they're joint citizens, they're members of their tribe, but they're also citizens of our state and our nation, and this is a group, they serve our country at a higher rate There are higher percentage of Native Americans serving in the military than any other minority population, and in many cases, even the Native American veterans are being let down by the federal government. So there's work that we need to do, and this is one of the places where those dialogues can occur.
And I think you're right. The whole bipartisan nature of the Governors Association allows you to do that much better than it's done in Washington. But speaking of Washington, you've been to the White House. You've met with the president. He came to North Dakota to talk about his tax plan. How's the relationship between North Dakota and the administration?
Well, I'd say for us, the new administration has been, if I can actually say, a breath of fresh air. But and it has to do with the cabinet appointments. I mean, the cabinet appointments that really matter to a state like North Dakota, and we've been talking about this, is, who's the Secretary of Agriculture? Well, it's Sonny Perdue, and he used to be a governor. He understands, how things happen. We had a horrific drought this summer. We had a drought with wildfire next door to our west in Montana. They had a season, one of their worst on record with wildfires, and some of that land is Forest Service land, which is part of the Ag Department. And so when we had issues related to the drought, the Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. responded to the state of North Dakota several times this year in less than 24 hours with a decision. Not with a, hey, we'll get back to you, and not with a, hey, we'll look at it. Hey, we'll send somebody out there next month. I mean, Sonny Perdue understands that when, farm families are stressed and cattle are dying and there's no crops, you need to make a decision, today, and he was making them. And so I think that's, fantastic. And we got Rick Perry, former governor of Texas, is running energy. We've had Elaine Chao has been to North Dakota. We're doing a number of things on the leading edge of unmanned aerial vehicles. And some of that also applies back to energy and agriculture, and whether it's pipeline safety or precision agriculture. So Elaine Chao was in North Dakota at the National Drone Focus Conference that we held. And so she's been fantastic. And I know we've got Secretary of Labor Acosta is going to be here at WGA talking to the group, and Sonny Perdue is going to be here at WGA at Western Governors Association. So again, the governors that have been at this a while have all said they've had more access in the last 10 months to cabinet officials than they've had at any point that they can remember. And having that access to cabinet officials really makes a difference for governors.
Now, you just kind of touched on this visit from Elaine Chao. Tell us a little bit about this unmanned, the unmanned aerial systems. It's kind of a burgeoning industry for you, right?
Well, absolutely. And of course, the reason why Secretary Chao from Transportation is there, because the FAA reports up into the Department of Transportation, and FAA federally controls the airspace in our country, as it should, because we've got some of the safest airspace in the country. I mean, we have 175 people dying a day from overdoses. We have basically hardly anybody dying any day from anything that's going on in the airspace. I mean, our airspace is super safe. But when you start going from manned aircraft, which are, if you think of them as being large and few, to unmanned, where we have an opportunity to have an explosion. I mean, you could have millions of more aircraft that are going, and they're going to be small. Then how do you develop an airspace that remains safe for people? And so there's a lot of technology that's involved in detect and avoid. There's a lot of technology involved in the capability of the aircraft themselves, the unmanned aircraft, and how they perform and what they can do, and it's really incredible. We've got a test site going on there right now with our two lead universities, University of North Dakota and North Dakota State, a 4-mile by 40-mile area of agriculture land. We have a 42-foot wingspan drone that flies over the top of that thing. In 1 hour, it can pull out a terabyte of data.
Wow,
a terabyte of data out of that thing. That's that is incredible to be able to have. That's 1,000 gigabytes for the people that are keeping track. But we have. To have that kind of information, I mean, you could have agronomist. I mean, you could have 1,000 agronomists out there in that 1 hour, and they wouldn't be able to come up with that kind of data, whether it's on moisture or seeds or, bugs, disease, chemical. I mean, all the things that are there. So, I mean, we're moving into an era. People talk about moving the era of big data. Well, when we have big data, if we can process that information, make decisions, then again, we can be more efficient, bigger outputs with lesser inputs, great for the environment, great for consumers, great for everybody in the whole food chain. And part of that's being enabled by these unmanned aerial systems. And so we're working with the FAA to try to get advancements, because right now when that drone's flying, we have to have a chase vehicle that's flying behind it because it's beyond line of sight of the person operating it on the ground. And we're close to having this breakthrough where we're going to be able to have beyond a line of sight authorization for operations in some test areas in North Dakota, and that's where the world is headed. Because we want to be able to put up a drone, have it fly at 400 feet, and fly for 500 miles of a pipeline, because it'll detect something before a human would, whether it's a temperature change, a oil leak, the kinds of automatic collected information that you can get from this is just better than humans. I mean, we're entering an era where there's a lot of things where humans aren't going to be the top of the food chain in terms of what we're good at, and that level of artificial intelligence is going to make our nation safer, and whether it's transporting oil or growing food. And it's an exciting future, but we have to have the rules in place and the structure in place, the governance in place to be able to manage that airspace. And North Dakota right now, we want to be in the lead of answering those questions.
Governor Doug Burgum, who had a fantastic career in the technology world before becoming governor of North Dakota, how do you think that your career really in the private sector has affected your position on tax reforms right now, which is, as I said, it's a big issue here in the United States. You've met with the president on it. What's going to happen, and what do you think should happen?
Well, I think there's a big opportunity for our country with tax reform to, put a system in place that's going to help put Americans to work, have people keep more money in their pocket, and help us as a country be more competitive. And I mean, just look at tech. I mean, you mentioned tech. If you take the big five, and people may argue big five, but I'm talking about, Google, AK, Alphabet as they call themselves now, and you throw in a Microsoft and an Apple, and an Amazon and a Facebook. You throw those folks in a pool and go, how much cash do those companies have trapped overseas that they're not bringing back because of our double taxation on corporate taxes? And with those groups, I think that number in that big five is approaching $1 trillion. $1 trillion from 5 companies.
Wow.
And so you have an opportunity just in tech is the sector which is really helped the United States become competitive in the world. It's the thing that's driven our progress and our productivity is getting more done with less is tech. And I, for one, would certainly, having lived and worked in that environment as a corporate executive, corporate officer at Microsoft for 7 years, I would want to see. I know that if that money comes back, that they're going to invest that money, in the U.S. in R&D, creating jobs, helping us become more competitive. If you have to get double taxation coming back, then you say, hey, should we build this plant in the U.S. or should we build it in Ireland? Should we build it in Eastern Europe? You make a decision. You make economic decisions. That's what you're paid to do by your shareholders, and so that would be a wave of capital that would. I think that's not talked about in the front page of all these stories because everyone's arguing about the corporate tax rate or standard deduction size, but underneath all that, if the repatriation dollars, if that tax drops from the highest in the world down to something reasonable, we're going to see a huge influx. And that's private capital. And we tried to get the economy started in this country, in 2008 by spending taxpayer money as stimulus money. How about we use the stimulus money that's not our own tax dollars that we've sent to Washington that they give back to us? How about we just have, money that's sitting in a checking account, but it gets spent in the U.S. as opposed to overseas and invested back here? So I'm very bullish on the need to get this done, and I think it's going to be great for the economy. And
So this is a little bit off topic, but speaking about spending money, you think about the western part of the United States. It's a beautiful part of the country, right? North Dakota is a great state, Great Plains, and so forth. I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here. If you could visit any western state other than North Dakota, where would you go?
Well, I have to tip a hat to our neighbors to the west, Montana, because after my grandfather back in the 1920s and 30s was Fargo's first public health official, and he loved Fargo. He loved fly fishing, and when he got a chance to become Montana's first state public health official, he and my grandmother in the 1930s, long before I was born, moved to Helena. So as a kid growing up in North Dakota, something I looked forward to every summer was visiting my cousins in Billings and my grandparents in Helena. And so, of course, I got a fondness for that state to the west. I just would like to bring a few of those mountains home and stick them in North Dakota, because we got a few ski hills, but we don't have the mountains that Montana does, and I love skiing.
So you think about the things, and again, these are just so that we can get a little better idea about you. We're at the iHeartRadio studios in Phoenix. Governor Doug Burgum attending the Western Governors Association. iHeartRadio, it's all about sound. You must have a certain kind of music you like to listen to. Maybe you listen to talk radio. What does Governor Burgum do when he's listening to music?
Well,
or sound.
Well, I'm a I grew up, graduated from high school in the 70s, went to college in the 70s. So there's if you're going to look at my the concerts that I remember and the playlists I remember, it's sort of 70s and 80s rock and roll, and then I got pretty busy after that and was had less time for music in my life. But it's wonderful today with all the digital delivery of music, and it's fun to see my three kids fall in love with some of the old, what I guess would be called old time music now, but they like some of the oldies. So it's been that part's been good. But talk radio in our state's a big deal, including the fact that you guys are broadcast up there, and so we appreciate the fact that you're there and keeping the dialogue. Because in a state like ours where you've got really a dispersed population over a lot of square miles, I mean, radio is one of the ways that it keeps us together as a community. It keeps everybody talking about the same topics and talking about how we can be better, and it plays an important role. Whether you're in the tractor or driving down a rural road, a lot of people got their ears tuned into radio in North Dakota.
That's great. Governor Doug Burgum at the Western Governors Association in Phoenix, Arizona. Thanks for joining us today. Good luck with the rest of your term as governor, and good luck with your time here in Phoenix.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great to be with you.